The fall Marcus Donovan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the San Francisco skyline that had once felt like his personal kingdom. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. The newspapers scattered across his desk told the story. Horizon Innovations collapses, Donovan's empire crumbles overnight, tech titan falls from grace. 48 hours ago, he'd been worth $8.7 billion. Now his accounts were frozen, his reputation destroyed, and his company, the one he'd built from a dorm room project to a global tech leader, was being dismantled piece by piece. "Mr. Donovan," his assistant Vivian said softly from the doorway. "The board members are waiting in conference room 3. He nodded without turning. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." When she left, Marcus loosened the Hermes tie that suddenly felt like a noose. How had it happened so quickly? The signs had been there. The unusual stock activity, the mysterious security breaches, the too-good-to-be-true partnership with Nexus Technologies. But he'd been too busy chasing the next breakthrough, the next billion, to notice the knife at his back. The board meeting was brief and brutal. Marcus watched as people he'd trusted, some for over a decade, refused to meet his eyes as they voted to remove him as CEO and distance the remaining assets from his name. His COO, Richard Westfield, his roommate from Stanford and best man at his wedding, delivered the final blow. "The evidence points to negligence at best, Marcus, at worst." Richard let the implication hang in the air. "The board feels your continued presence will only damage what's left of the company." By evening, the news was reporting that Marcus Donovan hadn't just failed. He'd supposedly misled investors and partners in a desperate attempt to save his crumbling empire. His phone, once constantly buzzing with calls and messages, fell silent, except for his attorney and the occasional reporter hungry for a statement. His wife, Camille, was gone within the week, taking their daughter Emma to her parents' estate in Connecticut. "I married a visionary, not a cautionary tale," she'd said, packing designer suitcases while avoiding his gaze. "Call when you've sorted this mess out." The investigation cleared Marcus of criminal wrongdoing 3 months later, revealing a sophisticated sabotage orchestrated by competitors and facilitated by insiders. But by then the damage was irreversible. His reputation remained tainted, his confidence shattered, his innovative spirit crushed under the weight of betrayal. He sold the penthouse, the vacation homes, the cars, everything that reminded him of who he'd been. His attorney managed to secure a modest settlement that would keep him comfortable if he lived frugally. But the thought provided little comfort. Money had never been the point. It had been about creating something revolutionary, about changing the world. 6 months after his fall, Marcus rented a small apartment in Oakland, away from the tech circles that had once celebrated him. He grew a beard, wore nondescript clothes, and avoided the news. His days blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and purposeless mornings. On a particularly gray Tuesday, Marcus found himself wandering through an unfamiliar neighborhood during a sudden downpour. Seeking shelter, he ducked into a narrow storefront with fogged-up windows and a wooden sign that read, "Starlight Books and Cafe." The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered, shaking raindrops from his jacket. The smell of old books and fresh coffee enveloped him. For the first time in months, something stirred in his chest. Not hope exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin, curiosity. He didn't know it yet, but he had just taken his first step back, toward life. The Encounter Starlight Books and Cafe was unlike any place Marcus had frequented in his previous life. Mismatched furniture created cozy reading nooks between tall bookshelves that reached toward the ceiling. String lights cast a warm glow over weathered hardwood floors, and handwritten recommendation cards accompanied books displayed on antique tables. It was chaotic yet intentional, the opposite of the minimalist design that had dominated his corporate spaces. Marcus chose a worn leather armchair in the corner, ordering black coffee without making eye contact with the barista. He picked up a random book from the side table, a collection of essays about resilience after failure, and almost laughed at the universe's heavy-handed symbolism. "That one found you, I think," came a voice, pulling him from his thoughts. He looked up to see a woman in her mid-30s with curly hair piled atop her head, secured haphazardly with what appeared to be a pencil. She wore a paint-splattered apron over a simple dress and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. Something about her presence felt steady, like an anchor in a storm. "Books have a way of doing that here," she continued, setting down his coffee. "I'm Sophia Reyes, owner of this little chaos." She gestured around the shop with a subtle pride that Marcus recognized, the look of someone who had built something meaningful from nothing. "Marcus," he replied simply, omitting his last name out of newly formed habit. "Just Marcus?" Her eyes, deep, brown with flecks of amber, studied him with intelligence but not judgment. "Well, just Marcus, you look like someone who needs more than coffee today." She placed a plate with a piece of homemade cinnamon bread beside his cup. "On the house, it helps with rainy days, external or internal." Before he could respond, the shop bell jingled, and Sophia was called away to help an elderly customer find a specific edition of a poetry collection. Marcus watched as she navigated the maze of shelves with practiced ease, her conversation with the woman warm and genuine. He returned to Starlight Books the next day, and the day after that. He learned that Sophia had opened the shop 3 years ago after leaving a prestigious publishing house in New York. She'd transformed what had been an abandoned hardware store into this haven of books and conversation. The cafe portion had been added last year. "Books feed the mind, but sometimes people need actual sustenance while they read," she'd explained. On his 5th visit, Marcus arrived just before closing time. The shop was empty except for Sophia, who was perched on a stepladder, reorganizing the philosophy section. "You're becoming a regular," she noted without looking down. "Though you never buy anything except coffee. Maybe I haven't found the right book yet," he replied, surprising himself with the light banter that once came so naturally to him. "Or maybe you're hiding." She descended the ladder with an armful of books. "From what? I haven't decided." Marcus felt a flicker of alarm. Had she recognized him? But her next words reassured him. "Everyone who comes here is hiding from something or searching for something, often both." She placed the books on a table and dusted her hands on her apron. "I was hiding too when I first came to Oakland." Something in her tone, a subtle undertone of shared experience, made Marcus ask, "What were you hiding from?" Sophia studied him for a moment before answering. "Failure, expectation, the narrative others had written for me." She smiled ruefully. "I was the golden child of Ellison Publishing, junior editor at 25, senior editor by 30. Everyone said I'd be running the place by 40. She moved behind the counter and began wiping it down. "Then I championed a manuscript everyone else rejected, poured my heart, soul, and reputation into it. The book tanked spectacularly, and suddenly I wasn't the golden child anymore. I was the cautionary tale." Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. "What did you do?" "I quit before they could shuffle me to some forgotten corner. Cashed out my 401k, drove west until I hit Ocean and found this place." She gestured around the shop. "Best failure of my life, as it turned out." Her candidness disarmed him. It had been so long since someone had spoken to him without agenda or judgment. "What about you?" she asked, leaning against the counter. "What brings a man who clearly once wore custom suits to my little shop day after day?" Marcus tensed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's good at reading people." She shrugged. "You have a particular way of sitting, straight-backed even in an armchair. And you check your watch sometimes, though I don't think you have appointments to keep." The observation was so accurate it momentarily robbed him of words. When he finally spoke, the truth emerged unbidden. "I lost everything. My company, my family, my purpose." Sophia didn't offer platitudes or prying questions. Instead, she reached beneath the counter and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Sometimes coffee isn't strong enough for this kind of conversation," she said, pouring modest amounts into each glass. She slid one toward him. "To new beginnings, Marcus, whatever your last name is, they're terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure." As they raised their glasses in the quiet bookshop, with rain pattering against the windows and the scent of old pages surrounding them, Marcus felt something shift inside him, like a rusted mechanism attempting to turn after months of disuse. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the possibility of hope, and for now that was enough. The spark Marcus began spending his afternoons at Starlight Books, initially sitting quietly with borrowed books, then gradually helping with small tasks, reorganizing shelves, fixing the temperamental espresso machine, or assisting elderly customers with heavy purchases to their cars. His business mind couldn't help noticing inefficiencies in Sophia's inventory system and accounting practices, though he kept these observations to himself. One rainy Thursday afternoon when the shop was particularly empty, Sophia placed a steaming mug beside him and slid into the opposite chair. "I have a proposition," she said without preamble. "The part-time college student who manages my books quit yesterday. Apparently accounting and English literature don't mix well. I've seen you eyeing my spreadsheets with barely concealed horror. Want to help me make sense of them?" Marcus hesitated. "How do you know I have any experience with finances?" Sophia's laugh was warm and genuine. "Besides the fact that you corrected my quarterly tax calculation when I left the forms on the counter last week, you have the look of someone who understands numbers, and frankly, I'm desperate. Numbers make wonderful sense in books, but terrible sense in business." That evening, Marcus stayed after closing, diving into 3 years of chaotic bookkeeping. What he discovered both impressed and concerned him. Starlight Books was surviving, but just barely. Sophia had built something beautiful but financially precarious. "It's worse than you thought, isn't it?" Sophia asked, bringing him a sandwich, as midnight approached. "You're breaking even, but with almost no safety margin," Marcus explained, showing her the spreadsheets he'd reorganized. One major repair or a slow season could be problematic. Instead of looking defeated, Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "I've felt that intuitively, but couldn't pinpoint why. What would you suggest?" The question caught him off guard. For months, no one had asked for his opinion on anything of consequence. The familiar feeling of analyzing a business challenge sparked something dormant within him. "You're sitting on untapped potential," he said, ideas flowing more easily than they had in months. "Your customer base is loyal but small. Your events are wonderful but undermarketed, and you're paying too much for coffee beans because you're ordering in small batches." They talked until 2 a.m., Marcus outlining strategies while Sophia challenged and refined them with her deep understanding of her customers and community. By the time they locked up, they had a 3-month plan to strengthen Starlight's financial foundation. "Same time tomorrow?" Sophia asked as they stood on the rain-slicked sidewalk. "I'd like that," Marcus replied, realizing he genuinely meant it. Over the following weeks, Marcus implemented small changes, negotiating better terms with suppliers, creating a more efficient inventory system, and helping Sophia establish an online presence that highlighted the shop's unique character. He approached these tasks with a humility that would have been foreign to his former self, learning from Sophia's intuitive understanding of what her community valued. The shop began hosting evening events, author readings, poetry nights, and book clubs that brought in new customers. Marcus remained in the background, handling logistics while Sophia shone as the face of Starlight Books. Watching her interact with customers, her passion illuminating her face as she discussed literature, he felt a kind of contentment he'd never experienced in his high-powered former life. One evening, after a particularly successful poetry reading that had packed the small shop, Sophia found Marcus calculating the night's receipts. "We did well," he noted, showing her the figures. "Not just financially," she replied, leaning against the counter beside him. "Did you see Mrs. Patterson tonight? She told me this was the first time she'd been out since her husband died 6 months ago. And that college student who's been coming to work on his novel finally read his work aloud." Marcus nodded, understanding what she meant. At Horizon, success had been measured in market share and stock prices. Here, it was measured in human connection and small victories. "You've built something remarkable," he said quietly. "Something that matters. We're making it better together," Sophia replied, her shoulder gently touching his. "Which reminds me, I have something to show you." She led him to a small room at the back of the shop he'd never entered before. Inside was a desk covered in manuscripts and editing marks, walls lined with more bookshelves and a large corkboard filled with notes and illustrations. "This is my publishing venture," she explained, slightly nervous. "I've been working with local authors who can't get traditional publishing deals, helping them self-publish quality work. It's small scale now, just 5 books last year, but it could be more," Marcus finished, immediately seeing the potential. His mind raced with possibilities: print-on-demand technologies, digital distribution channels, targeted marketing, strategies. "Exactly," Sophia said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I've been doing this on the side, but I think it could become a real extension of what Starlight stands for, giving voice to stories that deserve to be heard." As she shared her vision, Marcus felt something awakening within him. Not the hungry ambition of his past, but something steadier and more purposeful. This wasn't about building an empire. It was about creating value. Later that night, unable to sleep, Marcus opened his laptop and began researching independent publishing models. For the first time since his fall, he felt the familiar rush of building something. But this time the foundation wasn't technology or market disruption. It was Sophia's unwavering belief that stories could change lives, one reader at a time. As dawn broke over Oakland, Marcus realized he'd worked through the night, filling pages with ideas and possibilities. The spark that had been nearly extinguished in the aftermath of his downfall had found new fuel, and for the first time in over a year, he looked toward the future with something resembling hope. The crisp autumn air filled Starlight Books as Marcus pinned the last poster announcing their upcoming publishing workshop. 3 months had passed since Sophia had shown him her small publishing operation, and together they had transformed it from a side project into a promising venture. They'd named it Constellation Press. "Because every author is a star waiting to be discovered," Sophia had said with characteristic warmth. Their first official publication, a collection of short stories by local writers, sat proudly in the front window display. Pre-orders had exceeded their modest expectations, and 5 more projects were in various stages of development. "We need to talk about the Henderson manuscript," Sophia said, approaching with 2 mugs of tea. Her curls were pulled back today, revealing the constellation of freckles across her cheeks that Marcus had come to memorize. "The memoir about the former war correspondent?" he asked, accepting the steaming mug. She nodded. "It's powerful, important work, but the production costs will be higher than usual with all the photographs. It's a financial risk." A year ago, Marcus would have made this decision based solely on profit projections. Now, he considered different factors. Does the story need to be told? Desperately, Sophia replied without hesitation. Then we find a way to make it work. He pulled out his tablet, already recalculating budgets in his mind. Maybe we could launch a pre-order campaign or approach that journalism grant program we researched. Their conversation was interrupted by the shop bell. A tall man in an expensive suit entered, looking out of place among the cozy bookshelves. "Marcus Donovan," the man said, his voice carrying across the quiet shop. "I thought it might be you." Marcus froze, recognizing Edward Thompson, a venture capitalist who had once courted Horizon Innovations for investment opportunities. "Edward," Marcus acknowledged with a nod, acutely aware of Sophia's questioning gaze. "When Garrett mentioned he'd seen you working in some bookshop in Oakland, I couldn't believe it." Edward looked around with thinly veiled condescension. "Quite a change from the Horizon boardroom." "Life takes unexpected turns," Marcus replied evenly. "Indeed." Edward handed him a business card. "I'm putting together a new tech venture. We could use someone with your experience, even with your history. The compensation would be substantial, certainly more than whatever this place offers." His eyes flicked dismissively around the shop. After Edward left, promising to call next week, a weighted silence fell between Marcus and Sophia. "Donovan," she finally said. "As in Horizon Innovations. As in the tech billionaire who lost everything," Marcus finished. "Yes." Hurt flashed across her face. "All this time you never said who you really were." "I'm not that person anymore," he said quietly. That version of Marcus Donovan died the day Horizon collapsed. But you let me ramble about my tiny publishing dreams to someone who once ran a multi-billion-dollar company. She wrapped her arms around herself. I must have seemed so naive. Sophia, no, I need some time, she interrupted, backing away. The afternoon rush will start soon. We can talk later. For the rest of the day, they worked alongside each other in strained silence. Marcus helped customers and processed orders, mechanically, his mind racing. Edward's offer represented a path back to his old world. Wealth, influence, recognition. A year ago, he would have grasped at such an opportunity without hesitation. Now the prospect left him cold. After closing, Sophia finally spoke. Why did you stay? At Starlight, I mean. You could have rebuilt your career 100 different ways. Marcus considered his answer carefully. At first, I stayed because this was the only place where no one looked at me with pity or contempt. Then I stayed because the work felt meaningful in a way Horizon never did. He paused. And then I stayed because of you. Me? You see value in things others overlook. Forgotten. Books, struggling writers, broken ex-billionaires. He attempted a smile. You rebuilt Starlight from nothing. Watching you made me believe I could rebuild too. Not my empire, but myself. Sophia's expression softened slightly. Are you going to take his offer? No, Marcus answered without hesitation. Unless you want me to go. Is that what you think I want? She asked, stepping closer. I've lied to you by omission. I would understand if... Marcus, she interrupted. I'm hurt that you didn't trust me enough to share your past, but I'm not blind. I knew you came from money and influence. The details don't change who you've been these past months. Relief washed over him, but their moment was interrupted by Sophia's phone. Her expression changed as she answered it, color draining from her face. When? She asked, voice tight. Yes, I understand. I'll be there first thing tomorrow. When she hung up, Marcus recognized the look of someone receiving devastating news. What's wrong? The building's been sold, she said numbly. The new owners are terminating all leases in 60 days. They're converting everything to upscale condos. The next morning found them at the offices of Westridge Development, the company that had purchased the building. The representative, a polished woman named Vanessa Chen, was professionally sympathetic but unmovable. We're offering all tenants a relocation stipend, she explained, sliding a document across the table. It's generous by market standards. Marcus scanned the figure, enough to cover moving expenses but nowhere near enough to establish Starlight. In a comparable location with Oakland's skyrocketing commercial rents. This neighborhood needs Starlight books, Sophia argued, passion breaking through her usual calm. We're more than a business. We're a community space. People rely on us. I understand your attachment, Ms. Reyes, but Westridge has a vision for revitalizing this area, Vanessa replied with practiced patience. As Sophia continued advocating for her shop, Marcus studied the development plans spread across the table. Something about the architectural renderings tugged at his memory. Westridge is a subsidiary of Nexus Technologies, isn't it? He asked suddenly. Vanessa's slight hesitation confirmed his suspicion. Nexus, the same company that had been instrumental in Horizon's downfall. Outside, Marcus paced the sidewalk while Sophia sat on a bench, shoulders slumped in defeat. I can't afford to relocate, she admitted. Commercial spaces in this area have tripled in price. The stipend wouldn't even cover first month's rent and deposits elsewhere. Marcus stopped pacing, a plan forming in his mind. What if we fight this? How? They own the building now. Yes, but there might be irregularities in how they acquired it. His old strategic thinking was returning, but with a new purpose. And I still have some connections who owe me favors. For the first time that day, a spark of hope appeared in Sophia's eyes. You'd do that? Use your connections for Starlight? Marcus took her hand, his decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. Not just for Starlight, for us, for what we're building together. As they walked back toward the shop, hand in hand, Marcus realized that this challenge, saving the bookstore, that had saved him, felt more important than any billion-dollar deal he'd ever negotiated. The climb back from rock bottom wasn't about reclaiming what he'd lost. It was about discovering what truly mattered. And standing beside Sophia in the autumn sunlight, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd found it. The dawn snow fell gently. Outside the windows of Starlight Books and Cafe, as Marcus adjusted the vintage typewriter in the holiday display. A year had passed since their battle with Westridge Development, a year of challenges, victories, and transformations neither he nor Sophia could have imagined. The shop was busier than ever, expanded into the adjacent storefront that once housed a dry cleaner. The newly installed archway between the spaces now connected the original bookstore to the Constellation Room, where their publishing venture had grown from a back-office operation to a thriving independent press with 15 titles to its name. Their fight to save Starlight had become something of a local legend. Using his remaining connections and resources, Marcus had uncovered questionable practices in Westridge's acquisition of the building block. Rather than pursuing a lengthy legal battle, he'd proposed an alternative, a community ownership model, where current tenants could purchase their spaces as commercial condominiums. The proposal had required every bit of Marcus's business acumen and negotiation skills, plus the legal expertise of his former attorney, Diane Powell, who had taken on the case pro bono after hearing what Starlight meant to the neighborhood. The turning point had come when the local newspaper ran a feature about Starlight's impact on the community, complete with testimonials from everyone from school children to retirees who considered the bookshop their second home. In the end, Westridge had settled, allowing the existing businesses to remain under a new ownership structure. Marcus and Sophia had combined their resources, his remaining savings and her small inheritance from a grandparent, to purchase their space outright. Professor Garcia just called, Sophia announced, emerging from the office with a stack of papers. Her hair was shorter now, cut into a practical bob that curled around her face. The English department wants to expand our partnership next semester. They're adding 3 more student internships at Constellation. That's excellent news, Marcus replied, brushing snowflakes from his sweater as he stepped away from the window. We'll need the help with the spring catalog. He watched as Sophia arranged the manuscripts on their planning table, a far cry from the disorganized piles of their early days. Constellation Press had found its niche publishing overlooked voices, debut works from diverse authors, translated literature from independent international writers, and memoirs that larger houses deemed too niche. Their biggest success had been the Henderson memoir they'd nearly abandoned due to production costs. A crowdfunding campaign had not only raised the necessary funds, but had attracted attention from literary circles nationwide. The book had won a small but prestigious award, putting Constellation on the map. The interview crew will be here at 4, Sophia reminded him, consulting her watch. Are you sure you're comfortable with this? You've avoided publicity for so long. Marcus nodded. It's time. Besides, the story isn't about me. It's about what we've built together. The literary journal that had requested the interview wanted to profile Constellation Press as part of a feature on the resurgence of independent publishing. While the article would inevitably mention Marcus's past, the focus would be on their innovative business model and community impact. As evening approached, the shop transformed for their monthly Starlight Readings event. Regular customers helped arrange chairs in a semicircle, while local art students from the community college hung their work for the accompanying exhibition. The espresso machine hissed as their part-time barista, Javier, prepared for the evening crowd. Before the journalists arrived, Marcus slipped away to the small office he and Sophia now shared. From his desk drawer, he removed a small velvet box he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside was a ring, not diamond-encrusted or ostentatious like the jewelry he once bought without thought, but a simple band of rose gold set with a small star sapphire that reminded him of Sophia's eyes in certain light. A knock at the door made him quickly pocket the box. Sophia peeked in, her expression uncharacteristically nervous. There's someone here to see you, she said. I think you should talk to her before the interview. Puzzled, Marcus followed Sophia to the reading room, now empty except for a young woman standing by the bookshelves. She turned as they entered, and Marcus froze. Her features had matured, but he would recognize his daughter anywhere. "Emma," he whispered, hardly believing his eyes. At 19, Emma Donovan had her mother's delicate features but Marcus's determined gaze. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching a copy of Constellation's latest release. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she said without preamble. "I read about your bookstore in an article online, about what you're doing with independent authors." Marcus began, then stopped, overwhelmed by seeing his daughter after more than 2 years of separation. "It's good to see you, Emma." Sophia tactfully excused herself, squeezing Marcus's hand supportively as she left. "I'm at Berkeley now," Emma continued. "English major. I've been writing poetry." She hesitated, then extended a worn notebook. "I thought maybe your press might look at it, not because you're my father, but because of what you publish." Marcus accepted the notebook with trembling hands, recognizing this for what it was. Not just his daughter's poetry, but an olive branch, a chance to build something new from the ruins of their relationship. "I'd be honored," he said softly. "But Sophia is really the literary genius behind Constellation. Would you like to meet her properly?" As Emma nodded, Marcus felt the weight of the ring box in his pocket, a promise of a future he hadn't dared. Imagine when he'd first stumbled into Starlight Books on that rainy day. The interview that evening went better than expected. The journalists were interested not in scandal but in substance. How a former tech mogul and a visionary bookseller had created a sustainable model for independent publishing that prioritized community and literary merit over commercial appeal. "Some would say you've fallen a long way from your Billionaire days," one journalist observed as the interview concluded. "Do you ever miss that life?" Marcus looked around the room, at Sophia deep in conversation with Emma about her poetry, at the customers browsing shelves he had helped stock, at the local artists proudly standing beside their work, at the stack of books bearing the Constellation Press logo. "I haven't fallen," he replied with quiet certainty. "I've found my foundation." Later that night, after the crowds had departed and Emma had returned to her campus with promises to return, Marcus and Sophia stood on the small rooftop garden they'd created above the shop. City lights sparkled below them like earthbound stars, snow continuing to fall in gentle swirls around them. "Your daughter is remarkable," Sophia said, leaning against him. "Her poetry has real potential." "She takes after her mother in that respect," Marcus replied. "But I like to think she got her determination from me." Sophia turned to face him, snowflakes catching in her eyelashes. "Today felt like the beginning of something, didn't it? Not just with Emma, but with the interview, the university partnership, all of it." "It did," Marcus agreed, reaching for her hand. "Which makes this the perfect moment for what I've been wanting to ask you." As he knelt in the gathering snow, ring box open between them, Marcus reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought him here. He had lost an empire but found a home. He had fallen from tremendous heights only to discover that sometimes rock bottom was the perfect place to build a foundation. And as Sophia whispered yes through joyful tears, pulling him back to his feet and into her embrace, Marcus understood the most valuable lesson of all. True fortune wasn't measured in billions or buildings, but in the courage to begin again, in the joy of creating something meaningful, and in the love of someone who saw your worth when you couldn't see it yourself. Above them, stars emerged as the snowfall thinned, constellations mapping stories across the night sky, some ancient, some newly discovered, all part of the same vast, beautiful universe. Just like the stories they would continue to share with the world, one book at a time, illuminating the darkness with words that mattered. Together, they had transformed loss into legacy, despair into dawn. And that, Marcus thought as he held Sophia close under the winter sky, was the greatest success story of all.